Hello and welcome to this episode of Someone You Know, a podcast about disabilities, those who have them, and those who love them. I'm your host, Andrew Abraham, and today we'll be talking about disability rights in law and policy and how we can become more politically active in order to create change in our lives. Joining me today is Mr. Mike Baker, a disability advocate based in the state of Illinois who has helped pass 8 state laws by working with Illinois lawmakers and advocating on behalf of his son who has autism. His work over the past 10 years has made it easier for those with disabilities and their families in Illinois to get access to medical care and benefits. He's currently working on advocating for more direct support professional training. Thank you for joining me today, Mike. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Laws and policy are an important part of how our society functions, and making sure people with disabilities are included and acknowledged in said laws is a fundamental concept for disability advocates. These ideas impact all people, disabled or not, and learning how to engage with them is a big part of being an active and involved citizen. If you or someone you know has a disability, then this episode is for you. And even if you don't have or don't know someone with a disability personally, chances are that someone you know loves someone with a disability. And by listening here today, you too can learn more about the different laws and policies that impact those with disabilities. Let's get started. So like I was mentioning in our little intro, in the US, there are many laws that relate to the lives and rights of people with disabilities, from the landmark Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that guarantees a free and appropriate public education for all children with disabilities. And throughout history, people with disabilities and their loved ones have had to advocate tooth and nail in order to be recognized and included as equal citizens deserving of the same rights and protections as non-disabled Americans. And many of the things that most non-disabled people take for granted were only extended to people with disabilities after they were fought for, such as the right to a public education under IDEA. There have been many waves of disability activism and advocacy over the years, and while they may not have all had the same goals, like some might have focused on public transportation while others focused on the right to work, all these different types of activism have had at their hearts a recognition that people with disabilities were being treated unfairly or not having their unique needs taken into account. So they had to be advocated for in law and policy. Parents and family members have played a big role in much of disability advocacy, especially early on, helping pave the way for those with disabilities to begin advocating for themselves. And this continues to this day, where parents of children with disabilities often take active roles in their children's lives in order to be the advocate for their child that their child can't be for themselves. One of these advocates in question is our guest for today's episode, Mike Baker. Mike lives in Schaumburg, Illinois, with his wife and adult son, Brian, who has autism. He's been an advocate for his son and other children with disabilities for more than a decade and has some great information to share about getting involved in advocacy, his current goals and projects, and how current events may shape the next wave of disability activism. So without further ado, welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Now, just to get us started, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about your family and what brought you into the world of autism advocacy?
Well, I'm the stay-at-home dad of a 26-year-old with autism, my son Brian. And I got started in advocacy because of necessity. It originally started out over 10 years ago when my son had to get dental sedation at the dentist for keep his teeth healthy. And then I found out how much the procedure costs, and it turned out to be around $68,000, which we had a hard time paying for it because of the expense. Then I dug into why insurance does not cover sedation for people with developmental disabilities, and I found out the original law was only covering people from age 6 to 10 with autism and other developmental disabilities, and only in the hospitals. So instead of sitting back and accepting it, I got into advocacy, try to find a law to help provide coverage for people with developmental disabilities. which I started in 2015. 15, passing a law provides state coverage for people up to age 18 and allow them to get dental procedures in doctor's offices. That's where everything started, from my experiences as a parent and going through things with my son. Instead of sitting down and accepting status quo, I thought I'd do something about it. And that's how we kind of advocacy.
Thank you for sharing, Mike. Like I mentioned before, a lot of parents, siblings, and other family members get involved in this kind of work because they see their loved one or someone that they know either struggling with a certain thing, or they see something where the world may not recognize the unique needs and accommodations that someone might need in order to be successful. So I think it's great that as a parent, you were able to recognize that this is an issue affecting my family, and this is something that could possibly affect other families with disabilities that may need help with medical coverage, especially for people with autism that may not be the best at sitting still during those medical procedures. Like I mentioned in
Well,
this podcast before,
my son is 6'7", and if he went through a regular procedure without anesthesia, then he'd wind up hurting himself as well as the people around him. So he had to be put under, and it was a total shock to us as far as the cost, because that was the first time we ever took him to the dentist where he had to get a cavity filled. Other times we
yeah,
took him to the dentist and he had cleaning and nothing happened. But after this time, I decided not to sit back and be proactive as far as finding a way to help pay for his procedures.
I think it's awesome that you did, Mike, because my brother a few years ago needed to go under for a procedure. And our insurance thankfully did cover that anesthesia, but I think it's only because of work like you and from other advocates who have a very personal relationship to disability that that was even something that was considered. And yeah, it's been very helpful and you're definitely doing a lot of great work. So thank you for that, Mike.
Oh, thank you. And I also learned about what it's like to be part of Illinois politics, because the first bill I had passed, I started the bill to cover people up to age 26, because of political circumstances to get the bill passed, I had to get only bump it up to age 18, which I had to go back about a year later and do another bill to get their age raised from age 18 to 26. So it was a learning experience and my first diving into Illinois politics.
I bet you learned a lot from that time. There's another question I wanted to ask you, Mike, about Brian specifically. Do you remember how old he was when he first received his autism diagnosis?
Age 4, he was developmentally delayed. He wasn't talking the way he should be. He wasn't developing along the lines of what other people his age were doing. So we had to go get medical evaluations and get an IEP done.
Yeah. So when Brian was first diagnosed, what information and resources did you rely on in order to learn more about autism and other developmental disabilities?
Back in the 1990s, it was pretty early on as far as autism resources. So we had to go to places like Autism Speaks and other resources online. There wasn't any support groups that there are now. So we were at the early stages, unlike today where people can go to countless support groups and resources online and get help with autism. So back years ago, it was quite difficult when he first got diagnosed to find help.
Yeah, my parents have told me a lot of stories about when my brother was first diagnosed. He was 2 years old, and this was back in 2006. And things were already not as plentiful as the resources we have today, like you mentioned. So I can't imagine what things were like back in the 1990s. even though it would have been like a decade. The jump from the 90s to the early 2000s, I'm sure there would have been a little bit more, but like you were saying, from then until today, there has just been an explosion of knowledge, resources, and just awareness of autism and other intellectual and developmental disabilities in general. And I think it's so great that we know more about these things and that it's become more of a mainstream thing that people know about and are more willing to accept in today's society.
It's still not easy today, but it was a lot harder back in the 1990s.
I can't imagine. All right, and then my last of the introductory questions I have for you. How has being a parent to Brian affected your worldview and your approach to advocacy?
My approach for advocacy has been changed, and my worldview is changed because you got a day-to-day experience what it's like to have a child with autism. And sometimes it can be lonely if you don't have the support and the services you need. Respite care is still hard to come by. So you develop stay-at-home dad quite a bit insight into what it's like to deal with autism.
Thank you for your answers, Mike. I again love hearing your story and really what brought you to this kind of advocacy. It's always
It's
great to
more
hear. Oh, go ahead.
it's more on the necessity. I have to do this because I'm not the kind of person that sits around and lets things happen. You need to be out there doing things, be proactive on things because you're not going to get where you need to get with your child unless you're out there fighting for it every day. I like to see more and more people do the same thing. It would help. It would help everybody.
Thank you, Mike. And as you were just saying, your first big foray into disability legal advocacy was with Illinois House Bill 235, which required insurance companies to cover dental anesthesia for people with developmental disabilities. Originally, it was up to age 19, but have you been working to increase that age cap? I think I heard you mention.
It already was increased with a different bill.
Awesome. So it's up to 26 now, am I correct?
Up to age 26. And the thing is with the bill is if you have a self-insured plan, which is like offered to corporations, you can go back to the insurance company and protest, and, and insurance company can go by what the laws are in the state of Illinois, and they can see that Illinois has coverage for dental sedation up to age 26, but only for state plans. But if you have a self-insured plan, you could win a protest and get coverage that way. So there are ways to get the benefits in state as well as self-insured insurance plans.
Yeah, what really inspires me about your work and your story, Mike, is that you make it all look so easy almost. But I know it's a lot of hard work, but your enthusiasm and your passion, again, out of necessity. I definitely understand. My parents and my family, out of necessity, have become advocates for my brother and by proxy all children with autism and other developmental disabilities. So I definitely understand where this passion is coming from. And it's, again, great to see that with enough determination, with enough willpower, you can make change. And that's kind of the next question I wanted to ask about is your work with Illinois lawmakers. So when you first started working to pass different laws back in 2015, did you reach out independently to Illinois lawmakers or were you put into contact via other connections? Yeah, what led you to working with lawmakers in Illinois?
I had to do 100% on my own, developing relationships from the ground up, which actually going to visit them on my own time. It's 100% on my own time. I've never worked for as a lobbyist. Trying to find time, being a parent for my son. I made time to go visit legislators and come out and ask them, will you sponsor a bill for me? This is my idea. Can you put it in writing and put it into action? And I've been lucky to find people over the years that took up the fight for my son. So it's a lot of footwork, and if you're not willing to do the work, you're not going to be successful.
Absolutely. Again, I think it's just so impressive that you were able to take the initiative to go out and make these connections. I feel like a lot of people would either be, nervous to just, cold call and go, "Hey, this is who I am, this is what I want, and this is how I think you can help me." So again, Mike,
Yeah,
you just make it all. Go ahead.
he had to come out and ask them, "Can you carry this bill? This is my idea." In a hard push to say, "Can you put this? Can you file this bill?" And let's see if we can get it passed.
Thank you for sharing, Mike. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about your work with Illinois lawmakers is when you were working back in 2015 on that very first bill for dental anesthesia coverage, how would you say that first experience of working with lawmakers changed the way you approached your future projects and other policy recommendations that you've made?
I think it changed the way I approach future policy and also getting the bills passed because they need to learn the art of the deal. You need to be able to make a bill, be able to pass both chambers. So you need to be selective on how you write the bill up. So you get a real insight that other people don't have. I've had 8 bills and got the 2 chambers and do committees, and I never had a no vote. So you really need to make sure you find something that everybody can agree on. In other words, don't give somebody a reason to say no. And that's been shaped over the years by dealing with people down in Springfield and knowing about Illinois politics.
Thank you for your insights, Mike. Your experience is invaluable, and I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about just all these great projects that you've been working on and how almost like easy it is to get involved in this kind of work.
I've talked to a lot of people about how to get involved, and I keep on telling them it's as easy as you can use your smartphone for just about anything. Trying to break it down to the simplest of things that you can do to get involved with advocating.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, Mike, your current work involves you advocating for more training programs for workers known as direct support professionals at the high school level. And was it also the junior college level?
Yes, junior college level.
Awesome. Now, we talked a little bit about the role of DSPs in a previous episode, but to quickly summarize, direct support professionals, or DSPs, are individuals who support those with intellectual and developmental disabilities live the most integrated, interdependent, and fulfilling self directed lives possible. And that includes things like coming up with effective teaching strategies to help clients learn new things, getting people in contact with opportunities and resources provided by government and community organizations, and helping coordinate medical care of individuals. They played a very important role in deinstitutionalization and proposed community living options as an alternative for people with disabilities to live in integrated communities as valued members instead of in psychiatric facilities as patients. And now, Mike, your current work has put you in touch with Illinois State Representative Michelle Mussman, as well as Deputy Governor Ryan Croak. And again, like knowing what I know about direct support professionals and what this kind of work, how it impacts those with disabilities, I think, again, what you're doing is really fantastic. And I think it's always a great thing to make more people aware of disability support services, but also the very important role that direct support professionals play. And I just wanted to ask you a few things about your current work. First of all, how long have you been working on this current piece of legislation or your current goal?
I've been working on a current goal for the past 4 years. Legislation that we're talking about is the SB 3972 and SB 1558, which will be able to create training programs for people who want to be direct support professionals starting in high school and going into college. It was a way to give an extra tool for nonprofit providers, service providers to create opportunities for people at the high school and junior college level to increase their resume for when they want to go to four-year schools, and also give an extra labor pool for nonprofits to find people to be direct support professionals. The bills were passed in 2022. And the reason why I got involved, I stopped getting involved for about a year, thinking that after the bills were passed, direct support for nonprofit programs would take up the slack as far as creating programs for DSP workers. But I found out not to be the case. And it all had to do with my son. In a day program, when he find out that he won't be able to go out to all day field trips for several months, I thought that the service providers were creating more opportunities to find more people, but I didn't find that to be the case. So I got in contact with Deputy Governor Ryan Croak, in which we worked for several months to be able to get everybody on the educational side in line, as far as be able to take the phone calls from service providers so they could start the conversation on how to get DSP training programs up and running. And as of May, there was a memo sent out to everybody from ISB, Illinois State Board of Education side, to the Illinois Community College Board, on down, to accept the calls when service providers are calling looking to start programs, to take the phone call and get into a deeper discussion on how to start programs. So now, after that, I'm trying to get organizations to represent service providers, start making the phone calls. So it's total project's been about 4 years. The legislation to start DSP programs were passed in 2022. So it's been a long road.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like you've had a lot of experience with direct support professionals, seeing how important they are, and also just firsthand seeing the impact of when direct support professionals are either spread too thin or there's just not enough training out there. One of the things we mentioned in our DSP episode was there's not really a standardized or like formal curriculum for DSPs because it combines a lot of different skills and it's kind of an interdisciplinary field of work. So it can be very hard to make sure that every direct support professional has that same level of training, but there's also a high rate of turnover and burnout in the field. So I
The
think
wages
that
are increasing, and there's supposed to be a new training manual out in about another month or so. But still, the service providers are competing with people like Amazon and other companies for workers. Their wages are getting more competitive, but they're not where they should be. And you need to provide an extra tool and tool belt when you're hiring, to get creative in hiring, or you're never going to solve the DSP crisis. That's kind of where we're at now.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's exactly the right phrase I would use, a crisis, DSP crisis, because not enough are being hired to replace the ones that are either retiring or leaving the field. And the standard for educating paraprofessionals is not as concrete or defined as maybe some other forms of disability support service work.
I want to be able to eventually give a pathway to getting a 4-year degree. I'm in a DSP, also give an opportunity to get into nonprofit management. That's where I think things are lacking. DSP work is very hard. You're not gonna be able to do that for the rest of your life. It's a lot of physical type labor. So giving somebody an opportunity, work as a DSP, and also get promoted, I think is the way to go to get more interest and people want to work in the field.
Right. And just speaking from your personal experience, Mike, What would you say is the importance of direct support professional workers in the lives of people with disabilities, such as your son?
Well, DSP worker does everything to take care of the needs of people like my son. From the time you drop him off at day program to the time they leave, they handle all the needs from toiletry to eating to developing self help skills, and that's just day program. When you got the people in group homes, they do more than that. They're the ones who take care of all the needs 24/7. So DSP jobs could be everything from changing a feeding tube on somebody in a wheelchair, changing diapers. So it's not easy type work. So that's why you need to have a dedicated person. That's why wages need to keep on going up to help make people feel like what they're doing is being appreciated.
Absolutely. I think it's very important that direct support professionals and all people that work with those with disabilities feel that their work is appreciated, because it is. It is absolutely appreciated by the individual who they are working with and the family and loved ones of that person. I know there have been many, many different people in my life, in my family's life, who have helped my brother get to where he is, whether they're speech therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists. So many different people have been in my house, or we've gone to different clinics, and they all did so much different work, so much varied work, but all of it culminated into helping my brother get to where he is today. And because direct support professionals are responsible for so much, it's so important that their work is recognized, acknowledged, appreciated, and also that they receive, the proper compensation, that their wages keep staying competitive, and that they receive adequate training, and that it starts maybe a little bit earlier on so people can get a better grasp of the field.
Well, what's not being realized is the fact that we need to develop extra tools and how to recruit. Trying to throw money at the situation is not going to do it. You got young people interested in entering the field by offering college and high school credits, scholarships, and other ways.
And that, again, in the other episode that we did about DSPs, I was talking with Miss Abigail J. Rowe from the Next for Autism organization. They actually helped get me a scholarship that will help me get my direct support professional license. And the fellows program that they're running is specifically targeted at, right now, it's undergraduate and graduate students who are interested in becoming direct support professionals or working with those with disabilities. It helps them get work experience, but also helps pay tuition and fees. And they're, again, another organization that truly recognizes the importance and significance of direct support professionals and the work that they do for those with disabilities. Now, moving on, Mike. Again, thank you for all of your sharing, talking about your current work. I think it's very important. But there's one other thing that I wanted to mention about current events happening. So, as we all know, disability has often been used as an excuse to invade the privacy of individuals and institutions, based on this idea that all people with disabilities either cannot care for themselves or they need to be supervised by outside organizations for their own good. And in the past few months, we have seen semblances of this same thing beginning to start again, with Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. proposing that a national autism registry be created in order to undertake a massive testing and research effort to determine the causes of autism. When this was first announced, a lot of people were very upset and frightened as to how this information would be used, why this data would be collected, and how it would invade the privacy and the medical sanctity of people with disabilities. Also, some people are fearing that this information will be used to either support different debunked myths about the cause of autism or to revive other false causes of autism. Now, Mike, I just wanted to ask you, because I know you have a little bit of knowledge on this and how the governor of Illinois responded. First of all, what was your initial reaction to hearing about this initiative from the federal government?
I I was disgusted. I knew exactly what the confirmation of RFK was going to lead to, and I wasn't surprised. And I know I don't want to have somebody with no medical experience having a say in my son's care. So I was pretty disgusted with the news.
Right. And it's, I think, just so shocking that in 2025 we have somebody so high up in the government still peddling this insane conspiracy theory that vaccines cause autism. I know there was a huge scare about that in the early 2000s. Right around the time when my brother was first diagnosed, there was a big research article that was then redacted because the author realized that the information they were basing their conclusions off of were faulty or they couldn't be replicated in future experiments. But in many ways, the damage was done. That idea got out into the public consciousness, and people have sort of latched onto it. And so you see people like RFK still think that there is something that needs to be investigated with this whole vaccine autism thing. And it's just frustrating to see so many people with as much progress as we have made, still people holding on to old ways of seeing things and not moving along with our understanding of science and disability.
It's frustrating to still see that people aren't accepting the fact that increased reporting of autism is due towards better screening. It might not have to do with there's more people getting autism. It's just people are getting screened at earlier ages, and there's better techniques.
Absolutely. I mean, back in the 1950s, people could be institutionalized for, hysteria. People weren't being properly analyzed or evaluated for these kinds of disabilities, and we just didn't have the technical language or knowledge in order to understand what was happening in certain bodies and minds at that time. But now that our understanding has come so much further, our way of acquiring information and finding truth has come so far. It again, it's like you said, it's frustrating to see that people aren't as willing to accept autism for what it is and keep trying to find, what the problem is or try to fix the root issue when, many of us in the disability community have come to acceptance with either our own disability or the disability of friends and family.
The thing I'm worried about is the vaccine part of it, because he's getting to the point where RFK is making up the rules as he goes along as far as vaccines, to the point where I don't even know if my son can get a COVID vaccine this coming winter or flu vaccine. That's pretty scary.
Troubling. It's very troubling, especially since we just saw how effective a vaccine was in the recent pandemic we are still trying to pull ourselves out of. And the fact that people are still piling on this vaccine hesitancy myth is dangerous for everybody, disabled or not.
I was fortunate enough to be able to give a quote for Governor Pritzker's executive order for protecting the privacy of people with autism. And it's going to develop into executing the executive order, in which I might have a opportunity to be on an advisory committee, be able to execute the executive order on autism data privacy, which the governor just put into effect not too long ago.
Right, that's actually the second thing I wanted to talk about, Mike. The Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, actually quoted you in his recent statement or his executive order blocking the collection of information from autistic individuals in Illinois. I actually want to read out what he quoted you on. My son is deserving of the same rights to medical and personal privacy as anybody else in this country, even more so in today's climate. This order is a huge relief for families like mine, talking about the governor's order blocking the illegal collection of medical data. We want our children to have equal rights, not be treated like data points or monitored without cause. His privacy is worth our protection. And yeah, everybody's privacy is worth protecting, because once you let somebody else's privacy get violated, how long is it going to be until it's your own? So we protect privacy of all individuals because that's how our society functions. We all have our public persona, but we all also need our private information and private spaces. I just wanted to ask you, based off that quote and based off of the federal government initiative, how would it violate the privacy of citizens like autism, with autism like your son?
It would violate the privacy because the opportunity to get the proper medical care he deserves will be taken away from them without the ability to speak up, in, in which that would be our job because we have a guardianship of the person for my son. But he should be able to decide what kind of medical care he should have. And by doing RFK going the avenue that he is going, that's going to take the decision on medical care out of his hands and put it into his RFKs, which RFK is not qualified to give medical opinions.
Exactly. And what you said about your son deserving to have a say in his own medical care, to have autonomy and self determination, all of these ideas and how current events are playing out right now reminds me of a very important Supreme Court case that I learned about as a UIC student that helped to kickstart the deinstitutionalization movement and also set a new standard for care for people with disabilities. And again, it is based on the same underlying assumptions of incapability and people with disabilities needing to be supervised. So in 1990, two women from Georgia with intellectual disabilities, Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson, were voluntarily committed to the psychiatric unit of the Georgia Regional Hospital to be evaluated and treated for their conditions. And although doctors agreed that after being evaluated, both women were medically healthy and cleared to leave to continue their treatments elsewhere, Elaine and Lois were kept at this facility for several more years. And in May of 1995, the Atlanta Legal Aid Society brought a lawsuit against the director of the hospital, Tommy Olmstead, on behalf of Lois Curtis, which is abbreviated as LC, alleging violations of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, as well as the ADA for unfair discrimination on the basis of disability. This case was heard in 1999 and decided in June with 6-3 in favor of LC Lois Curtis and the integrated community living proposal. So this court case was known as Olmstead versus LC, and the majority opinion, penned by the late great Ruth Bader Ginsburg, found that the actions of Olmstead and the Georgia Regional Hospital violated Title II of the ADA, which says that states must integrate people with disabilities into community settings whenever justified. This ruling set a precedent for the rights of individuals with disabilities to live integrated lives in their community, and also define the responsibilities of the state for facilitating that transition. And so while this court case and the idea of creating a national autism registry may seem different on the surface, the ideas and the assumptions that underlie both of these events are similar. It's the idea that people with disabilities are unable to live in integrated, holistic communities and must be monitored for their own safety, whether that's somewhere in a psychiatric facility or by taking the data, the private personal medical data of people with autism. And former Justice Ginsburg herself wrote that unjustified segregation of people with disabilities perpetuates this notion of unworthiness of people with disabilities to engage in community life and opportunities. And it's that idea that we perpetuate by not including people with disabilities in law and policy, or trying to violate their privacy and medical data under the guise of this is for their own good or this is for research to understand the bigger issue. It it all is based off of stereotypes and myths that are perpetuated by people who really don't know a lot about disabilities, the people who have them, and the people in their lives who are a part of that person's medical recovery or history. It makes it easier for them to become victims of things like invasions of privacy and forced institutionalization. And now, Mike, the last question that I wanted to ask you about all of your work, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on. Again, all the work that you've talked about, you make it sound so easy. And so, from your perspective, from your experience, what can people who want to be more active advocates do to start making change in their lives? And you talked about, we all have a cell phone and we can all get into contact with people and make those connections, educate ourselves. What else can people do on their phones to be more engaged?
I would start out talking with your local state representative and state senator. Introduce yourself, tell them what your story is, ask them what things you're looking for that from them, and if they can provide those answers. And if they can't provide those answers, going online, going to places like Autism Speaks or the Arc of Illinois, learning about the issues, and getting involved. Going to legislative meetings in town halls, learning what legislators are like, and getting to know them personally. That would mean getting out and maybe visiting them once in a while, or talking to them on the phone, or doing a Zoom meeting. You could do that with state legislators. It's all developing relationships. You need to start somewhere, and starting with your local state representative and state senator, developing a relationship so they know who you are, what your story is, and they know that you're looking for help from them. There's no easy way to start, but I would start with giving a phone call to your local state representative and state senator.
Thank you for your advice, Mike, and thank you for sharing all of your experience in advocacy and policymaking, and thank you just in general for all the work that you are doing for not only your son, but for other children and young adults with disabilities like my brother and so many of his friends and classmates. I think what you're doing, as you've mentioned, out of necessity, is making the lives of so many people in this state a lot easier and a lot more stress-free. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for tuning into today's episode on disability rights in law and policy. I hope you learned something new about the different laws that help people with disabilities be recognized, acknowledged, and respected in our daily lives. If you learned something new or you found something in this episode interesting, leave a comment and share this episode with a friend. And remember, even if you personally don't have or don't know anyone with a disability, chances are someone you know loves someone with a disability, and now you're a little bit more well-informed on the topic. We'll see you next time.